Hi, my name is Kurt Walling. I'm the Loss Prevention Director for Shasta-Trinity Schools Insurance Group. I'm your safety guide. Today what we're going to do is we're going to go over a bunch of different topics. This is a back-to-school safety class, and I kind of just jammed everything into one slideshow. So it's a little shortened. The topics themselves are shortened, but I think all the pertinent information is there for you. And we're going to hit quite a few different topics today. So I think without any further ado, we're just going to go ahead and get started. I'll be sharing my screen and going back and forth, periodically, because I'm going to have to give you some demonstrations on some things. We're going to talk about some common causes of injury and prevention. We'll talk about slips, trips, and falls, which is probably the most likely way you're going to get hurt at school. We'll talk about safe lifting, bloodborne pathogens, fire safety, and I'll briefly go over pest management, IPM. And I know I'll have some questions about COVID-19 when we're doing the bloodborne pathogens and maybe even the IPM class. So feel free to ask those questions. I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about how we're going to do our cleaning and stay safe and keep the kids safe. One of the things I always like to remind you guys is that you guys belong to a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority. So I work for an insurance company, but you literally own an insurance company. It's self-funded and it's nonprofit. We do workers' compensation and we do medical, dental, and vision. So the idea behind school districts banding together and having their own insurance company is that it saves you money in the long run. Here's the thing that most people don't understand, though, is that when one of you gets sick or injured at school and you go to the doctor, we just pay your medical bills. But the more of you who get sick or injured and go to the doctor, the more money we have to ask from your school. So they make contributions, and we use those contributions to pay your medical bills. So that's why it's so extremely important that we try and be safe and we take care of each other and we avoid unnecessary illnesses, because it really does come out of your operating budget. And at the end of the day, we want to keep that money in the school for the kids. That's the long and short of it. At the end of the training, what I would like you guys to be able to do is identify potential safety issues. Look out around you, see what the hazards are, and then mitigate those hazards on your own. Help keep your area safe for others. If you see something, say something. If you see something broken, fix it, or tell somebody who can fix it. If it can't be fixed, mark that area off. But it's really important you guys work together as a team to stay safe. And the end goals being, we want to stop or avoid these avoidable injuries. OSHA is generally considered a dirty thing, a bad word, but OSHA is on your side, okay? OSHA is for the workers. Back in the 1970s, every single day, people would get up and go to work, and about 39 people a day would die at work. But since the 70s, since OSHA has become a big deal and they've started enforcement actions, that number's gone down to about 13. It's still a lot of people, but it's a lot better than 39. And it's all because employers are being held accountable for keeping their workplace safe for employees. And they've really cracked down on this a lot. And even the last few years, the Department of Justice is holding districts and employers in general accountable. So when you hear about OSHA or you hear about these efforts to keep employees safe, it's really about you. It's about keeping you safe, and it's just making the employer do what they're supposed to do to follow the law and provide a workplace that's free of unnecessary hazards. When we're talking about workers' compensation, it's for the employee. I mean, it's also for the employer. It's very important that employees that are hurt at work are taken care of. But you can see that $1 billion a week for workers' compensation across the country, it's kind of spendy. Top 10 causes of workers' compensation claims is overexertion, and that's, you're just doing too much too fast for too long. You're overdoing it, hurting yourself, your back, your hips. Falls are very high on the list. Falls cause a lot of problems and create a lot of headaches for employers, and it costs insurance companies a great deal of money. And usually the fall's on the same level. That's just tripping over a rug or something simple. We're not even talking about the next one falls to a lower level, so falling off of a high elevated workplace. People struck by objects or equipments are on the list. Other exertions, roadway accidents or incidents. Fortunately, we don't have that many issues. We don't have, your transportation department isn't as big as something like Shasta Union High School District, where they are at risk. They have people running around between different school sites, and then they have buses, and that can be an issue. Not such a big deal for you. Slips or trips without a fall can also create injury, a twisting of the back, a spraining of the ankle or the knee. And if you go all the way to the bottom, repetitive motion injuries, cumulative trauma from doing the same small things over and over. And that can be something like typing, moving things around on the playground, but that causes a lot of issues. Here's how you're going to get work. Here's how you get hurt at school, okay? It boils down to lack of attention, because you guys have so much going on. There's so many things going on. And frequently there's conflicts between two things that you're supposed to be doing and something that you feel is more important. So we get in a tendency where we're rushing and we're getting complacent and we're not paying attention. If I could do one thing, if I could impress upon you one thing, it would be to slow down, pay attention, stay alert, stay alive. It's just as easy as having situational awareness and watching out for yourself, but also for your fellow employees around you. The first topic I'm really going to go into is slips, trips, and falls. We see about 1 million people across the United States go to the emergency room every year because of slips, trips, and falls. And 5% of the time, the person who falls down breaks a bone. Now, broken bones cause a lot of long-term costs and issues, because it's not just getting a bone, breaking a bone and getting a cast, but you're going to the doctor, potentially the emergency room. There's medication involved, painkillers. There's repeat visits to have casts taken off and replaced. And then, of course, physical therapy and all that stuff. It amounts to a lot of money and amounts to a lot of time off. Slips, trips, and falls represent the primary cause of lost work days. So more people are out of work because of slips, trips, and falls, and regardless of the injury. They're the leading cause of workers' compensation claims. I get an email every single time there's a workers' compensation claim for our JPA, every single one. And I see a great deal of slips, trips, and falls. And it's funny, because a lot of this stuff they're injuries that I've never even heard of before, like a buttocks contusion. I was a paratrooper in the Army, and I didn't know what a buttocks contusion was until I became a school risk manager. But apparently that's when you fall on your backside and get a bruise. It costs money to go to the doctor and get that dealt with. The Consumer Product and Safety Commission says that floors and flooring material contribute to more than 2 million injuries a year. And that's because we have carpets that are flipped up, or they get jammed up underneath the door jamb, and then you trip over them when you come in the room, or there's tiles missing, or there's something loose, a loose surface on the ground or on the floor. So that's something you really have to pay attention to, especially when you're walking into the school, into the building. That's where a lot of these accidents happen. So think about in the wintertime, when you're out running around, or the kids are out running around, and their feet are wet, or they have slush on them, they come in. If there's not a dry rug that's been maintained and cleaned, all that wet moisture and that ice and slop is going to get right there on the floor, and that's where you're going to slip and fall down. Any spills that you guys have, and I know that if you're eating in the gym, which we may not be doing a whole lot of eating in the gym because of social distancing, but the spills that we have on those hard surfaces, that's a good place to fall down and slip. Weather hazards, obviously, we get a lot of work comp claims from folks up in your neck of the woods. Not so much in Reading, because in the wintertime we don't get ice, but up there you guys get ice, you get sleet, and we get people just getting out of their car and walking into the building. It's a good way to slip and fall down, so you have to be careful of that. If you're using salt, make sure you're replenishing it. scraping the ice that's accumulated out from in front of the doorways. And then if you see something or you find a place that's especially slippery, make sure you say something to somebody whose responsibility is to take care of that. Other ways you can trip, if you have an unobstructed view, if you can't see what you're walking through, and a lot of times it's because we're carrying something and not paying attention, trying to carry too much. There's poor lighting. In the wintertime, I know we've forgotten now because the sun comes up so early and stays up until like 9 o'clock. But remember in the wintertime when it's dark and you show up to work, if you come to work early, it's dark. And if you're the first person on school grounds that morning and you notice the lights out, you might want to tell somebody who wouldn't know that when they arrive later. Got to get those lights fixed. We had a rash of tripping injuries on a stairwell, on an internal stairwell at one of our schools 2 years ago. And we had four different people got injured on this 3-step stairwell between 2 rooms in this building. And it just didn't make any sense because there was a handrail and the steps were carpeted. They were not slippery. And I actually went over there and I realized that it was, there's a light that was missing. The light bulb had burned out and it was just dark. The only reason these people had tripped, all 4 people got injured, is because it was dark and they were misjudging the step. It's simple things like that that cause problems. And that could have been solved by someone just saying something to somebody. Make sure you're cleaning up the clutter. If you have a bunch of boxes or books or things laying around, I know the kids have a tendency to run around and leave a path of destruction sometimes. You gotta be careful and make sure they're cleaning up after themselves, and then we're not creating our own problems by leaving debris and training equipment laying around. So clean this stuff up, and especially cables. With these schools that we go that we use, they're built in the 60s and 70s, back when we didn't have a whole bunch of computers. So back then, the only thing that they needed to plug in was like a vacuum cleaner every night. Well, nowadays we had 10 or 15 computers. We have rolling carts that are recharging iPads. There's cords literally everywhere. So you need to come up with a good cord management system. Keep those cords out of any walkways. And if you are going to put them across the walkway, make sure you use one of the sleeves that make it nice and low to the ground so they can't coil up and trip. Be careful about putting the rugs and carpets over cords, because those will eventually allow you to break those cords and cables down, which would represent a fire hazard. Make sure you're closing drawers behind you. Don't get in the habit of leaving a drawer open because you're going to go right back and get something else out of it. I've actually cracked my knee on a drawer at work, and we had a fun discussion about safety. And it's funny, the safety manager has to talk to his folks about that at work, but sometimes it happens. With this wrinkled carpeting, floor mats that are lifted, I can't even walk into a Home Depot and not stop and fix the carpet if it's wrinkled up in front of the floor. It's just what I do. So kind of be safety oriented like that around the school, and help your friends and kids out. Some things that you need to consider is proper footwear. If you look at this picture, hey, nice, they're good, strong boots. They might look perfectly fine on the uppers, but if you flip them over, there's no tread there. Take a look at your shoes, see if they're cracked, see if there's pieces missing. Wearing soft-soled shoes if you're working outside or playing with the kids, playing sports like tennis shoes are much better. Leather shoes or flip-flops, things of that nature should not be worn around schools. Make sure they fit properly. So if you have to run after a student or run to help a student, your shoes aren't flying off. I've seen that happen and cause an injury before. And then if you are on your feet all day, and teachers and nurses, like folks that are on their feet all day long, you guys should be wearing soft-soled shoes. You shouldn't be wearing hard leather shoes or boots. It's just not good for your back and hips and knees. Go ahead and do yourself a favor and invest in some decent shoes with good Vibram soles. Also, make sure that your floors are clean, you're using proper signage, and then any obstacles that you do have that have to be in the way, make sure they're out of the main path of travel. If you get a load of books in and you haven't had time to put those away and stack them, just put them out of the way. Try not to leave them in the main path of travel. If it's dark and you don't have any good lighting where you're working, if you're out in the shed or if you're in a classroom and the lights are out, you got to have some type of portable lighting. So battery powered lights, flashlights, something of that nature that'll light up the entire area. And then, of course, when you are carrying or pushing objects, you need to make sure you're watching where you're going and not carrying something that's so big it restricts your ability to see. Okay, I think this all makes sense here. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to ladder use and misuse. I know most of you guys have seen this slide before, but the top picture is, it's a step ladder, right? And the bottom picture is not a step ladder. We frequently make that mistake at schools. I've seen a number of accidents from people standing on a rolly chair trying to staple something on the wall. What I've tried to do the last few years is I've tried to get all the school districts to purchase step ladders for every classroom. If every classroom had a step ladder, they wouldn't be worried about standing on, desks or trying to step up just for a minute, just a quick, I just got to do this one thing on a rolly chair. The problem with having just one or two step ladders around is they're always going to be down in the custodian's closet, they're going to be down the hallway, and you're not going to want to take that extra minute to go and get that. So it's way more convenient to have a step ladder in every classroom. The number one rule for ladder use is make sure you're using the right type of ladder. And there's a dozen different types of ladders. So for 99% of the use there at the school, you're just going to have probably a 3 or 4 step ladder. Number two, don't fall off. It sounds simple, but we have folks doing all kinds of crazy things on ladders. You're going to get hurt on a ladder by being distracted. And there's a million distractions at school. If you're trying to do something during school, you're on a ladder, kids are pulling on your shirt, trying to get your attention, or yelling, or something's going on outside, and you're going to get distracted. So make sure that when you're using the ladder, you're in it. You are paying attention, and you're not going to be distracted by something else. Inappropriate footwear is another way to get hurt on a ladder. Any type of slippery soled shoe that'll allow your foot to slip through or off that rung is going to cause problems. High heel shoes are going to cause problems. Soft shoes that are going to put extreme pressure on your instep, those are going to cause problems. So you should be wearing, again, at a minimum, tennis shoes, or what we used to call Sierra sneakers, that little hiking shoes. Those things are perfect for ladders. Also, if you're stressed out, if you're rushing, if you're feeling bad, if you're sick that day, you shouldn't probably be on a ladder. Just have somebody else do it, or wait till another day. If you're outside using a ladder, pay attention to the weather. Okay, if you're on an aluminum ladder, and most of this stuff I'm talking about, this is great information for use at home as well as at school. If you have an aluminum ladder, you're outside, you shouldn't be on that thing in a rainstorm trying to clean gutters when there's lightning and thunder in the area. Okay, just common sense, but we do that kind of stuff. At the same time, if you're outside or you're on a soft surface, you make sure you're stabilizing that ladder before stepping up on it so it doesn't sink in and then send you flying one way or the other. And then go slow. Take your time. The joke is, if I wait to the last minute, it only takes a minute, but that's how you get hurt. So take your time, be methodical about it, and don't get hurt. There's this thing called the belt buckle rule when you're on the ladder. They call it the belly button or the navel rule. Never lean outside the two sides of that ladder, the frames of the ladder, with your belly button. You should stay centered on the ladder all times. If you don't, the ladder's going to go one way, you're going to go the other. And you should be working or climbing at the center of that rung or that cleat. Also, face the ladder when you're going up and down the ladder. When you get to the top, you don't turn and face down it and go down it like a set of steps. There's a front side and a back side to most ladders. Some step ladders are dual-sided, but it's easy to tell if it's a one-sided ladder by looking at the other side. The frame rail on the other side is going to be really thin. Don't step on those, because once you step on them and bend them or break them, you're going to have to throw the ladder away. You can't fix it unless you send it to the manufacturer and ask that they fix that for you. When you're climbing a ladder, maintain 3 points of contact. So 2 hands, 1 foot, or 2 feet, 1 hand, which means if you're carrying a bunch of stuff up a ladder trying to staple it to the wall, you're going to have someone hand it to you, or you're going to have to use a tool belt, or you're going to have to use a tagline if you're up high, really high. Okay, so the best thing to do is just get somebody to help you hand stuff up to you. All right, moving right along. We're going to go into body mechanics. And honestly, with slips, trips, and falls, I've seen a lot of accidents, but the expensive, the expensive injuries are almost always going to be shoulders and backs. Um, I don't see a lot of head injuries. I don't see a lot of other, knee injuries, but the back injuries are what's scary, because once you get someone in a hospital for a back surgery, that's a long-term issue, and it's extremely expensive, and it takes that person out of the game for a long time. So the key here is just preventing the back injuries in the first place. When you start citing body parts, and we're not talking about the type of injury or the cause of the injury, like slips, trips, or falls, but when you talk about the body type, the back is the most frequently cited body part getting injured. Keeps people away from work. Okay, lower back pain is the number 2 reason people go to their doctor. The only thing people go see their doctor more for is colds and flus, and we all go. I mean, everybody has gone to the doctor for colds and flus, so that puts things into perspective. Average cost per claim is over $32,000. Like, how can a back injury cost $32,000? I got a sore back. I went to the doctor. They gave me some pills. I was good. It's not really what we're talking about. If someone goes to the doctor and they're diagnosed with a crushed disc or a herniated disc, and there's a surgery involved, that's usually about $100,000 to $125,000, and that's just the surgery. And then you've got all the other associated costs. They've got to be out of work, so they're getting workers' compensation. You have to hire somebody to be there for them when they're not there. You have to pay for medication. You have to pay for physical therapy, and it's very expensive. So when you average it all out, it comes out to about $32,000 per person. Overexertion and cumulative trauma are what cause the problem. So working too hard or doing the same little thing over and over and over a million times. It's funny, but if you look at back injuries and ladder injuries, or ladder accidents, we keep going back to the same thing. You get in a hurry, you're rushing, you're being told to do too many things in too short a time with too few resources. So as you're rushing around trying to get everything done, you start to get frustrated. When you get frustrated, it makes you tired and you get complacent. So it's just a cascading series of issues that contribute to these back injuries. Okay, so think about how you can avoid the rushing in the first place and the frustration that's associated with that. It's not always possible, but keep that in the back of your mind. Now, everybody's been injured in their life here. Every one of us has had an injury where you could say, yeah, I was in a car accident, and that day I got smashed into and my knee got injured. When it happened, how it happened. And so it's pretty easy, right? The problem is, a lot of us have also, and me included, have done something simple, like bent over to pick up a pencil, and then found we couldn't stand back up, and it was extremely painful. It's excruciating. Your back went out. And a lot of people, they've heard it. Oh, my back went out. That is a result of cumulative trauma, repetitive motion, doing the same thing over and over and over again. It has nothing to do with picking up a pencil, but it does have everything to do with what you did for the weeks or months leading up to that. Working out, going and picking up a million books and putting them back, or picking up a kid and putting them something, just over and over and over, doing these light things. So what we have is these small, unnoticed traumas, things that you wouldn't attribute to a long-term issue. The issue here too is that you can have a genetic predisposition towards these back problems. If your parents have arthritis, like my parents have arthritis, you have a higher likelihood to have a back injury. And arthritis is actually an autoimmune disorder, so it's hereditary. You can also exacerbate that by getting injured. So you can have post-injury arthritis called traumatic arthritis. And if you already have a predisposition towards arthritis, that can be a problem. This is going to manifest itself in pain and bony growths in the back, which is going to press on your nerves and be very painful. Age, as we get older, we wear out. Our muscles, our tendons, our connective tissues, they wear out. If you think of a rubber band that you placed on a windowsill in the sun, you leave it there for a few weeks. When you put it there, it's nice and stretchy and pink. And when you pick it up the next time, you stretch that rubber band out and it's just going to break. Okay, so that's kind of the same way you can think about your bone, your tendons, your connective tissues in your back. They're just going to get brittle, and unless you take them off that windowsill every once in a while, stretch them out and manipulate them, they're going to get dry and brittle and break. So you need to move your body around. Okay. Another issue we find that causes problems is muscle substitution or favoring. If you injure, say, your left arm, you're going to use your right arm more. And pretty soon, you're going to overuse your right arm to the point where you're going to injure that as well. This is common with folks that have injured a leg or an arm, and then they go back and have issues, have to get fixed, a surgery on the opposite shoulder. My father actually had 3 shoulder surgeries. He injured his left shoulder, had surgery. A couple months later, he was doing everything with his right shoulder, and went back and said, my right shoulder's messed up. And they said, yeah, you need surgery on that one. So while he was recovering from the second surgery, he injured his previously injured shoulder again. It was a horrible example of muscle substitution or favoring. You can also have early degeneration. This is another thing that, if you ask your folks if they've had any early degeneration issues like degenerative joint disease or degenerative bone disease, that can give you an indication whether or not you're going to have that issue in the future. But the biggest thing that you're going to have a problem with here is improper lifting, bending, and overexertion. When you lift something, you should not be lifting with your back, and you should definitely not be twisting. Those are the 2 most important things. So you should be lifting with your legs, and you should always lift in straight, controlled manner instead of twisting and lifting at the same time. The folks at the schools that I see have the biggest problem with this are those that are working in the cafeteria, where they're food service workers. So they're bending and twisting and lifting things off a cart and putting it in and out of the walk-in freezer or out of the refrigerator. So we see a lot of bending, twisting issues with those folks. When we're talking about your spine, you'll notice here that there's 24 flexible bones. In between each one of those vertebrae, those flexible spine bones, you have a disc. It's a little shock absorber. It's meant to deform as you move around, okay? It's kind of like a little jelly-filled donut. It's got a thick annulus ring on the outside with this little goo stuff inside, and it's meant to actually flex and allow you to move. Running through the backside of your spine is your spinal cord. It carries all the nerve signals from your extremities to your brain back and forth. So it's a pretty complex system. You got a bunch of bones moving around. They're sharp bones. You got this disc in there between each one of them. You got spinal cord that runs through there. And when you start overusing your back or lifting wrong, things start to get irritated. Then you get inflammation. Inflammation is what causes the pain because you get a bunch of extra nutrients and oxygen and blood cells. Everything's going to this one spot to try and fix the problem, and it actually creates pain and swelling. If you look over here, and I think you should be able to see my cursor, but this is a normal joint right here, okay, and a normal disc. If you look down here, you can see that you have a disc that's been crushed a little bit, okay? It doesn't look too bad until you look at the x-ray. Down here, on the other hand, you see that this joint, this union right here, is extremely different than the other joints. You see how this is called a broad-based annular bulge. When the disc is crushed out the side, what's happening in this particular case is the spinal cord right here is being pushed on. It's being pinched and pushed against by that disc that's escaping from that joint space. Here's a pretty scary scan of somebody's spinal cord and a herniated disc really disrupting that spinal cord. Now, if you think about the spinal cord carrying those signals, those electrochemical signals back and forth, you can think about a garden hose. If you've ever used a garden hose and someone stepped on it or someone snuck up behind you and kinked it, and you wonder where the water went, or it came out all bubbly and weird, well, that's literally what's happening with your spinal cord. It's being compressed, the signals are being confused, and it's not getting the proper signals, which creates pain, all right? This is a bad way to go. And a lot of people have a great deal of pain from something simple like this. It can be fixed, but it's extremely expensive and extremely dangerous, because when you start cutting into the back like that, you're getting very close to the spinal cord, and that a simple nick could create lifelong ramifications. But they can go in and fix things. So if you look at this, and the reason I'm telling you this, the reason I'm showing you this, is because this is all preventable, okay? You see the normal happy vertebrae and the normal happy discs, nice disc space in between here, okay? Well, what happened, and this is a C6, cervical C6, C6, C7 right here in the neck. What we can see here is that these two discs are a lot flatter and a lot smaller than these ones. And that's because what happened is this disc that used to be right here was crushed. It was crushed completely flat, and those two vertebrae were grinding on each other from overuse. So what the surgeon has to do is they have to go in through the neck. They have to grind down the broken and abraded parts of those vertebrae. And then they have to scrape all that old ruined disc out and then replace it. This particular piece right here is cadaver bone. So they'll take a piece of bone from somebody else's body and they'll place it in there as a spacer, because you need to space it back out so your tendons and ligaments and everything are still spaced out properly. And then what they'll do is they'll take a titanium plate and they'll put 4 screws through that titanium plate to hold everything together. Now, it's a terrible thing to go through. So my point here is, again, if you can avoid this, you should avoid it. This is actually an X-ray of my neck. And I told you guys I was a paratrooper in the Army. I was in the Army for 26 years, and I used to jump out of airplanes, and I would wear a Kevlar helmet on my head every day, and then those things are heavy. And then with a night observation device, night vision goggles on it, and the radios and all the other stuff hanging from my head, over the years and years and years of that, my vertebrae just got destroyed. Didn't happen in a single day. It didn't happen in a week. It didn't happen in a month. It took years to do that. But that's what you're up against right there. So think about what you're doing on a daily basis that could potentially be ruining your back or your joints, because we are all susceptible to things like this. One of the easiest things you can do is just lift right. Just lift correctly. When you go to decide to pick something up, and I wish I could I like demonstrating this and having people do it in the classroom when I'm there, but it's extremely important that you look at your load. Look at what you're going to pick up and decide whether or not you can pick it up. Frequently, and men are the worst at this. We don't want to ask for help. We're just going to pick it up and then deal with the pain later. But you look at that load, and then if it looks too big or unwieldy, just ask for help. Just ask someone to help you out, or get a tool or something to lift that up, or break it down into smaller pieces. If it's a box full of books, just get some help, or avoid the potential injury in the first place. When you do decide that you're going to pick something up, you need to get right close, very close to that object. Straddle that object. They'll call it a box of books. Put it in between your feet, and then put your feet at least shoulder width apart. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bend at the knees. Okay, bend at the knees. Reach straight down with your arms, and you're going to grab that object in a way that you're not going to slip or fall or have to readjust. When you stand up, you look straight forward, and you're going to tighten your stomach up, and you just stand straight up by extending your legs. You shouldn't be using the crane method where you're bending over at the waist and picking it up in that fashion. You want to make sure you're using your legs to pick it up. Once you get it picked up, you can again go ahead and adjust your arms and pull it closer to your body. The reason you want to keep it close to your body is because of simple physics. If you hold a 10-pound weight 1 foot away from your body, that equals 100 pounds of pressure on your lower back. So the closer you can get those objects to your body, the better it is for your back in the long run. When you do decide to walk away with that object, don't rotate your upper body and lead with your shoulders or the object. Turn your entire body in the direction of travel and then start walking. It's just the same as lifting and twisting at the same time, but now you're carrying and twisting at the same time. You don't have to be a robot, but you need to make sure that your spine is straight as possible. And when you're setting things down or you're putting heavy things down and storing things, you need to put them in what's called the power zone. That's a zone in between about your stomach and your upper thigh. Anything heavy should be stored on the shelves or on desks about in that power zone. And think about where do we always put the heavy stuff? We always put it on the bottom. We always put it on the bottom shelf, or we put it underneath the desk. And potentially because we don't want it to fall off. Think about it though. If you can put the heavy stuff at your home or at work right in that power zone, you're going to save yourself the whole problem of lifting it in the first place. And then big heavy things should obviously go up on the top. Or I'm sorry, big lightweight bulky things should go up on the top. Here's a diagram of someone who's lifting improperly. You can see his bend at the waist. He's like picking up like a crane. And then the guy on the right is squatted down. The one thing that I would say he could do differently is have his feet flat on the floor. But if you can't get your feet flat on the floor, this is better than nothing. And then he's going to stand straight up. Like as I told you, I've had neck surgery and I've been pretty sore for a great deal of my life. And so I learned these lessons the hard way. If your back is sore, and just do what your mother told you to do. Remember what your mom used to tell you when you're sitting at the table? Sit up straight, quit slouching, quit, sometimes when I see my kid laying on the couch and he's twisted up, like playing with his phone or watching TV, I'm like, good Lord, that looks so uncomfortable. I'm just like, sit up, man, but maintain a good posture, maintain those joint spaces and sit in a natural position. Try not to be all slouching. If you are slouching or if you do get uncomfortable and you want to move around, they say that the next position is the best position. So if you are slouching or you like to lay around on the couch and curl up, that's all fine as long as you don't stay there for too long. If you have pain sleeping and you have trouble getting up in the morning and you're up all night, you're tossing and turning, there's a couple things you can do. Make sure you're sleeping on your side or on your back. And when you're on your back, go ahead and take a pillow and put it underneath your knees. What that's going to do is it's going to force your back into a straight position. Your spine will be in a much straighter position. And the same thing if you're laying on your legs, put a pillow between your legs. That's going to take the weight of that top leg off of your hips, and it's going to put your spine back in a straight position. It actually works really good. Of course, you're going to have to wake up to readjust and roll around, but you shouldn't be rolling around a whole lot if you're comfortable. If you're going to exercise, make sure you're stretching. If you're going to load something into the classroom, you're going to shelve a whole bunch of books. Just do a couple of rotational exercises. Do a few stretches before you do that. Get some blood flowing to your connective tissues and to your muscles. The joints have lubricant in them called synovial fluid, and the synovial fluid production is increased when you move. So if you move before you start working, you're going to have more lubrication in your joints. You're going to avoid injury. And then make sure you strengthen your core. I know ever since we were in school, we had a gym teacher that's saying, you need to strengthen your core. You need to do, your sit-ups. But they're really right, because the muscles in the stomach are way stronger than they are in the back. And they carry quite a bit of the load, whether you know it or not, when you pick up an object. When you're moving around, you use your abdominal muscles more than your back muscles. So if you have strong abdominal muscles, it's going to make it a lot less likely that you're going to get injured. Obviously, don't twist and bend at the same time, and then don't sit or stand in the same place for a long time. And when I'm doing ergonomic evaluations and I tell people about movement, I get a lot of questions about stand-up desks, and the question is, I've heard that sitting is the new smoking. Sitting is bad for you. We're all going to die because we're sitting. I want a stand-up desk. Well, that doesn't really solve the problem, and sitting isn't the problem. The lack of movement is the problem. So there's a 20-20-20 rule. If you find yourself sitting at your computer at home or at work for more than 20 minutes, you need to get up and move your body. It's a 20-20-20 rule because if you look every 20 minutes, if you stop what you're doing for 20 seconds and look 20 feet away, that's going to benefit your eyes. Unless you let your eyes readjust, but even better, get up and move 20 feet away. Go get something from the refrigerator, go to the bathroom, go get a drink of water, go talk to a friend, get something off the printer, but you've got to move your body. That's the most important thing. Soft-soled shoes are going to help you a lot, and then heels less than 1 inch. And it's not just high heels for ladies that I'm talking about. If you, like me, grew up in the woods, a lot of the guys wear those big logging boots with the big heels. Those things are awesome when you're walking around on logs and in moss out in the woods. But if you're on a hard surface, it's not good for your back and hips. So go ahead and get some flatter soled shoes. Also, we have a problem in this country, and particularly in our profession as schools, of listening to our doctor, because everyone wants to go back to work as soon as they possibly can to help out, to see the kids. And so we frequently exacerbate injuries without really meaning to. It's a well-intentioned motivation to go back to school when you're just okay but not completely healed. So what I'm saying is, make sure you listen to what the doctor's telling you. They're telling you, to only lift 20 pounds for a reason, because they know more than you. They know more than us. And if we start lifting heavier stuff than what they want us to before it's ready, or we're ready, then we're just not going to heal as quickly. And then, we're going to cause our whole team problems. Okay. So listen to your doctor. I'm going to change speeds a little bit here. We've seen an interesting increase in the number of work comp claims for child-caused or student-caused injuries. And I'm not talking about a student who is standing behind a teacher and accidentally trips them, okay, or a ball that gets accidentally thrown towards a teacher and catches them in the face. I'm talking about kids that are biting, scratching, kicking, poking teachers with stuff when they get angry, tripping the teachers on purpose. And it doesn't happen at all districts. It's a cultural thing, and it happens obviously more at this special day class schools, and but it's become an issue. So de-escalation techniques are becoming more and more important. And I would encourage you guys, if you have not already attended some kind of a de-escalation class, to go ahead and look into it. There's a bunch of tools out there, millions of different studies and videos and trainings, but it's really important to make sure that we're heading these issues off before the student completely departs of baseline behavior and becomes aggressive. And there's reasons these kids get aggressive sometimes. They have a rough home life. They have a rough time at home. They have no ability to say what's going on in their life, and so they kind of take it out on their friends and their teachers. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of stuff going on in their lives that we don't even know about. We're going to do Bloodborne Pathogens. This is a class that's required through OSHA, Code of Federal Regulations, and Cal OSHA. The place you can find this is in the 29 CFR 1910. That's the OSHA manual, and it's under General Industry Training Requirements. This is where we might have some questions about COVID-19. There's a lot of information out there. I have a lot of information on my website, and you guys have probably been inundated with it. You're probably sick of hearing about it, about wash your hands and stay 6 feet away from everybody. So I'm not gonna go into it in detail, but there are a lot of similarities between the viruses that we are typically exposed to and COVID-19. The bottom line is they create an infection. So you get this small biological entity, a virus. A virus is not even alive. It's not even a single-celled creature or organism. It's just a little bit of RNA or DNA that's floating around. It's activated in a living cell. It can only live in a living cell, and it hijacks that cell to create copies of itself and to carry on its other functions. So when it gets in a cell and starts creating and multiplying more copies of itself, then eventually it exceeds the cell's ability to contain it, and they burst through the cell walls, killing the cell, and then going on to infect other cells. That creates a whole lot of problems for the body as it tries to fix the problem. There's proteins and there's all kinds of stuff that's created when the body reacts to this. In fact, the reason you get a fever when you have an infection or when you have a viral infection is because the body's trying to heat up to kill the virus. So we have some natural defenses against these viruses, but things like the novel coronavirus, we have no other way of solving the problem. So it's kind of a scary deal. Bacteria is so prevalent. There's more bacteria on this planet than any other living organism. If you took your body and took all the bacteria out of it, it would fill a 1-gallon coffee can. And those bacteria cells are tiny. They're much, much smaller than a human cell. In fact, there's more bacteria cells in our body than there are human cells because they're smaller. So you hear bacteria, you think, oh, that's bad stuff. Well, we need bacteria. We have to have bacteria in our body for normal life functions. Digestion, there's a bunch of bacteria in our body to fight off bad bacteria, so there's good bacteria, but the bottom line is bacteria is everywhere, and some of it's going to make you sick. So you need to practice what's called universal precautions for both the viruses and the bacteria, and that's just treating everything as though it's infected if you think it's infected. So for an infection to occur, you need a few things. Obviously, you need a germ. You need a microorganism that's going to invade the body. And that's really what they're doing, is they're trying to invade the body and set up shop. They're trying to procreate and use us as a host and carry on its life functions. But in order to get that virus, you need a vehicle. You need a disease vector to get that virus to you. For a lot of the viruses, there's airborne transmission. So if someone's walking around sneezing or coughing or even breathing or talking, those viral particles will hang in the air. You'll breathe them in, and they'll get lodged in your upper or lower respiratory tract, depending on the virus, and then it'll go to work making copies of itself, and you'll start getting sick. There's also hard surface contamination. Those larger particles can settle out on hard surfaces, and then you'll touch them with your hands, which is not going to get you an infection. But then you touch your eyes or scratch your mouth, and then that bacteria attacks the body. The way it gets in, the route for the germ to get in the body is easy if you remember warm and wet. So anything warm and wet, lips, eyes, tongue, nostrils, any mucous membranes, even a cut or abraded skin or poison oak somewhere you've been scratching, makes it much, much easier for that virus or even bacteria to get into that body. Okay, so that's why they're always telling you to wash your hands, sanitize surfaces, don't touch your face, don't touch your nose, things of that nature. And then for an infection, you also could have a weak immune system. Think about all the people who they say have been dying from the virus. A lot of them have a compromised immune system, or they have a pre-existing medical condition. So your immune system's already working hard and potentially degraded somewhat. That just makes it harder for the body to fight off that virus or that bacteria, okay? But you can have a perfectly strong immune system and still get super sick. And sometimes the germs win, and they're everywhere. The two diseases that we really are supposed to talk about when we're talking about bloodborne pathogens is hepatitis B and HIV. Because they're both really, really bad diseases, and they're also really easy to prevent. So that's why we're required by OSHA to talk about these two. For hepatitis B, the incubation period is 6 weeks to 6 months. That means, ironically, similarly to COVID-19, you could have it and not know it. You can have the virus and not know it's in your body. You could even at some point be transmissible at the latter end of that and not know it. Symptoms, you may not have any symptoms at all, or they may be very severe, okay? Frequently, when we talk about Hep B virus symptoms, we're looking at loss of appetite, fatigue, throwing up, having a stomach ache, abdominal pain. That sounds like the flu, so it's hard to tell, okay? But when you have someone who's got jaundice, they start turning yellow, their eyes turn yellow, the urine's very dark, that should raise some flags, and you should go ahead and go to the doctor and ask the question. It's actually quite easy to find out if you have Hep B through a simple blood test. There's two phases of hepatitis B. There's an acute phase, and there's a chronic phase. And the difference is it's chronic if the virus is still active in your blood after 6 months. So for the first 5 months and 29 days or however, you're considered in an acute stage. This is why we have to worry about this at school. 90% of us, healthy adults, if we get it, if we're exposed to it, our bodies will fight it off, we'll build up an immunity to it, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. The problem is only 50% of the children who get it are going to be able to develop that immunity because their immune systems aren't as strong. And when we're looking at infants, little kids, 90% of the little kids who are exposed to hepatitis B, they get it and they've got it. They're going to go into the chronic stage. When you have chronic hepatitis B, you're at high risk for cirrhosis of the liver. Cirrhosis is, typically associated with alcoholism. People die of cirrhosis. It's a liver disease. You can also get liver cancer. It just destroys the liver, and that's the problem with hepatitis B, is it wrecks your liver and it can kill you. You're also infectious to others after 6 months. You can be infectious before that, but typically speaking, you're not. Death occurs among 1% with acute hepatitis. So 1% of all the people in the green area who get it, 1% of them will die from this. There are some differences between the different hepatitis viruses that you have to understand. Hepatitis A is actually foodborne and fecal oral contaminant. You can get it on the street. You can get it by touching stuff or eating the wrong thing. It's not as dangerous as Hep B, and certainly not as dangerous as Hep C. The difference between hepatitis B and hepatitis C is that with hepatitis B, if you get it, you can't get it fixed. There's no cure for it, okay? But there's a vaccine to prevent you from getting it in the first place. With hepatitis C, you can fix it, okay? There's no vaccine for it, but you can fix it once you get it. It costs about $100,000 per person, and it's a very long, drawn-out, painful treatment, but you can fix it. That's why we talk about the hepatitis B vaccine, because it's 95% effective. If you go to the doctor and you get your 3-shot series, there's a very, very low likelihood that if exposed, you'll get hepatitis B. The shots aren't going to give you Hep B. And it's good. What they used to say is about 10 years. It's good for about 10 years. But now you can get it. You can get the vaccine, and they're not going to give you another one. You'll probably never get another Hep B vaccine again unless you get exposed. If you get exposed to somebody's blood, then you can go in as long as it's within 24 hours, and you can get another shot series started. As long as it's within 24 hours, you're safe, okay? It's just an intramuscular injection, and they give you 3 shots over 6 months. So you get a shot, wait a few months, get another shot, wait a few months, get your last one, and then you're good. If you're in a high-risk category, or if you are you're working at an organization like a school or a hospital or somewhere where you are exposed to potential infectious environment, then these shots are typically free through your insurance. Okay. For HIV, there's a lot of immunodeficiency viruses. There's a equine for horses. There's a feline for cats. But we have our own. We have HIV, human immunodeficiency disease. Basically, what it means is your immune system is degraded by a virus. The virus attacks the immune system, and then you're unable to fight off other diseases. So AIDS or HIV doesn't really kill you. It's all the other stuff that you get that you're not able to fight off because of HIV. When you start talking about AIDS, it's a little bit different. Now, this is an acquired syndrome. You have to have HIV, you have to have the virus before you can have AIDS, okay? Again, it's an immune system problem. It decreases your ability to fight off other infections. But when someone has AIDS, you can identify that in them by looking at them. You can tell they're sick. You can check their white blood cell count. You know that now they have AIDS, and their immune system is now compromised. With HIV, you can be asymptomatic for 2 to 6 years, and then have AIDS up to 15 years before it can kill you without medication. There's a lot of medication now that make it easy to survive for the long haul. And there's Magic Johnson got AIDS, HIV, back dozens of years ago, and he's still okay. He's still alive. Now he has to go to the doctor and do a lot of different medications and things of that nature and ramp up his immune system, but it's possible. It's just very expensive. Much better to just avoid it in the first place. They consider you have AIDS when there's a T cell count of 200 or less, and you start seeing these opportunistic infections. A lot of people who have AIDS die of pneumonia type issues, so breathing issues. There's also cancers, sarcoma, cervical cancer, TB. There's a lot of other issues, but there's 23 different clinical conditions that are identified that are related to HIV and our reduction in ability to fight them off. So how do you get HIV or Hep B at school? If you had to draw a line between the body fluids and the body openings, obviously it's bloodborne pathogen, so blood and then broken skin. That's how it's going to happen at school. So what do you have to be afraid of, or not afraid of, but what do you have to be aware of at school to prevent yourself from getting HIV or Hep B? All you have to do is think about how you're going to get someone else's blood on you. The two scenarios that scare me the most, the two things, number one is a car accident, okay? Car accident, or God forbid, a bus accident. Because you got a bunch of broken glass, you got bleeding students, you got bleeding teachers or a bus driver, motorists passing down on the road. And if you have a bleeding kid, if you're a normal caring adult, you're going to pick that kid up and try and help them immediately, okay? You got to be very careful with that. The other scary thing is an earthquake. If you think about your school, think about your classrooms. Where are the windows and where are the students sitting? What else is potentially going to fall on them or hit them and cut them or break them, causing bleeding? We can solve a lot of those problems by rearranging the classroom and making sure things are bolted to the walls. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're not getting someone else's blood on you. When we're talking about preventing day-to-day normal transmission that we wouldn't associate with a disaster like a bus accident or an earthquake, what we can do is we can use this thing called universal precautions. This is literally what is in the OSHA manual. This big, long sentence, it describes universal precautions. It's just a method of infection control, and all it is saying is that you treat everything that's potentially infected as though it's infected. So if you've got spit, if you've got urine or fecal matter or anything that comes out of another person's body, just treat it like it's infected. It's easy to do. You just wear gloves, don't touch it, don't let it get on you. If you do, wash it off, and then disinfect areas where you do have blood, things of that nature. We call them OPIM, other potentially infectious materials. The best thing you can do, you've heard this a million times for the COVID-19 coronavirus, is just wash your hands. Just wash your hands, don't touch your face, lips, tongue, mouth. You should always wash your hands before drinking or eating, before handling clean utensils, equipment, any food preparation, even handing out snacks and stuff. Make sure you're washing your hands. Always wash your hands before and after going to the bathroom. If you remember what I was telling you before about warm, wet areas of the body that are really easy to get that infection going, think about going to the bathroom. Yeah, I know it's weird to wash your hands before, but it's a good way to prevent infection, okay? And then obviously to protect yourself and other people, especially, wash your hands afterwards. Always wash your hands after contact with any body secretions whatsoever. And then I know some of you still have to deal with diapers and garments that have urine and other nasty stuff on them. Any children have discharges and they all have snotty noses and crying and things of that nature, make sure you're washing your hands. And then when you're removing disposable gloves or any type of protective gear, okay? Let's talk about gloves for a minute. You should be wearing gloves if you have any type of sores on your hand, all right? Any cuts, any open lesions. If you're handling any contaminated disposable trash, okay? If you have any direct hand contact with body fluids, you're cleaning something up or you're helping a student, you are cleaning up body fluid spills. And then if you have to help a student with a diaper, you got to have gloves on, okay? That's to protect that the transmission of the virus and bacteria to your hands. And then you're going to have to take those gloves off appropriately. Let's talk. I'm going to unshare for a minute. We're going to go back to, I'm going to show you most of you guys have seen this before, but it's important that you guys understand how to take gloves off. Putting gloves on is easy. Now you put your gloves on. It's going to play that game with me where it's going to black it out. Okay. You're going to put your gloves on, and then you're going to get your infection when you take your gloves off because we're not doing it correctly. So when you're taking gloves off, you should be wearing these, like I said, anytime you anticipate any contamination or touching any type of body fluids. I'm going to turn my background off so you guys can see me better. Okay. When you're taking your gloves off, it's important to keep the outside on the outside and the inside on the inside. So if I was going to take this glove off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hand, I'm going to pinch the outside wrist area of the glove, the dirty glove, and I'm going to pull it inside out, completely inside out, just like you're taking a sock off inside out. And that irritates everybody who has kids because then you got to flip their socks around. But we want to do this in this case, right? And we're going to take that glove completely inside your other hand, okay? And now here's a tricky part. This is the hard part. You're going to look around to make sure there's no debris or liquid or fluids or anything around the wrist where you're going to reach up underneath, okay? And you're going to reach up underneath and grab the inside of that glove. See, I'm not touching the outside of the glove. I'm reaching the inside, and I'm going to pinch that right there. And I'm going to pull that. So now I'm still touching just the inside. I'm going to turn the whole thing inside out. Now both gloves are inside, and I can touch the outside. I can throw this in the trash. All right. Let's talk about trash for a minute, and let's talk about how much blood constitutes a hazardous material or a biological hazard. If you have somebody who has a bloody nose, and this happens all the time, you get somebody who has a bloody nose, we're going to go ahead and help them out. We're going to put our gloves on. We're going to pinch their nose and catch the blood in a tissue or something. When you're done with that tissue and those gloves, dispose of that in the trash. You don't have to worry about any hazardous material or biohazardous waste bag or anything. You do, on the other hand, have to worry about disposing of a biohazardous waste when whatever it is soaked into, like if it's a rag or if they're wearing a hoodie and they got a cut and now their sweatshirt is just so soaked with blood that if you squeeze it, blood comes out. That's biohazardous waste. You have to put that in a biohazardous waste bag and you put your name on it and the date, and then seal it, and then take it to a transfer facility that'll accept it. Usually it's a hospital or a clinic or the fire department, and it's different for every single town. All right, so every district has their own protocol, so you're going to have to find out what you're supposed to do at your district. Okay, go back to sharing. And here we are. If you have sharps, if you have glass, if you have anything of that nature laying around that has blood on it, you're going to have to be very careful with that. Needles should be put in a sharps container, but so should glass and other things that could cut you that have blood on them. A sharps container can be a jelly jar that has a lid that you screw on nice and tight, okay? Or it can be an actual plastic sharps container that you buy. Most school districts have one or two of them in the nurse's office or in the main office. So if you find something that's sharp, go ahead and throw that in there. If it's a needle, don't try and break the needle. Don't try and bend it over. Very carefully take the whole thing and put it inside that sharps container. You guys don't have the problem that they have here in the city. A lot of folks in the city here who are working around the schools will find needles on the school campus. It's crazy, but they're out there in the grass and laying out there by the playground. So be careful about that stuff. If you do get exposed to someone else's blood, number one, wash. Okay, warm soapy water, 10 to 15 minutes. Wash it, scrub it, make sure it's completely off your body, and then pay attention. See if you start developing any symptoms. Report the incident to the supervisor as soon as possible. And here's what I would do is I would make sure that I call the SIA nurse hotline, because if you call and you say, I've been exposed to someone else's blood, whether it was a bite or it was, you got poked by something sharp that might have had blood on it, or you got blood on you from a kid who had a bloody nose or got a cut on the playground, call and tell them, because what they'll do is they'll log that. And then in 6 weeks, or 6 months, if you develop signs and symptoms of Hep B, then it's a work comp claim, which it would be, okay? I would also, if you're not sure whether or not you've had the Hep B vaccine, go ahead and discuss that with your doctor. Check your medical records and see if you had the vaccine. If it's been over 10 years, you might want to just go ahead and get another series started. But you got to do it quickly. Make sure you do it within the first 24 hours. Okay. When we start talking about testing and HIPAA, there's some very specific guidelines that school districts have to follow. It's actually against the law. It's a misdemeanor to tell someone else that you know someone has a positive blood test or a negative blood test for HIV. So you're not allowed to share that information unless they allow you to. You cannot use an AIDS test to determine whether or not someone's employable. You know, you can't say, well, I'll hire you on the condition that you don't have HIV, you're not HIV positive or have AIDS. It's against the law. You can't ask. You can't even ask. They can't ask you to take a blood test. You can't be required to share the results if you already have HIV, okay? But you do have to take a general physical to make sure that you're physically able to do the job. So if you're supposed to be able to pick up a student and put them on a wheelchair or something, you have to physically be able to do that. So that's the one thing that most of you have done if you've gone and done your fit test. But they can't require you to give them the results of an AIDS test. Now, why is that? Well, most of us are of the age that we remember when AIDS first came out and it was a big scary thing. And there's so much hysteria in the streets that people were getting run out of town and their kids were getting ridiculed at school, and the hysteria just couldn't meet any need. It was completely baseless. People who have HIV or HIV positive are very, very careful. They know that they have to watch themselves around other people. And the bottom line is, it's really hard to get HIV. It's extremely difficult. The virus only lives outside the body for seconds. Okay. Other viruses and bacteria will live outside the body. Some will last several days to several weeks, depending on the environment. But HIV is not one of those. It goes away very quickly. I'm going to talk to you guys about school fires, okay, fire prevention. And so I'm gonna share a different screen. And what I'm going to share with you is a video of this tree being set on fire. This is basically to replicate a decoration in a classroom near the door. It's made out of paper mache, and it's on a coat tree. You guys remember the hat rack coat tree things? It's got paper on the wall here to simulate a classroom environment, but this is in a fire shelter. It's like a fire training facility, so it's masonry, brick walls, and it's fire department doing this. But I want you to pay attention to how fast this burns, and think about some of the decorations and stuff you've had in your school in the past. So let me share this video.
This is going to be a display of a tree made out of purple paper and felt, and it's going to be placed near an exit where we have found displays often to be close to an exit in a classroom. We're going to ignite it at the bottom, and we're going to watch it burn. We're going to measure how fast it burns and the intensity of the flame. It's July 29th. It's about 90 degrees, about 9:30 in the morning. How many seconds? That was 1 minute. all the paper is falling down. We've got a lot of fall down that's remaining burning. That's probably the felt. We still have burn on the wall where the construction paper is against the brick masonry wall. Still have burning.
So, you guys saw that? How fast that went? That's pretty scary. And if you think about that in the classroom, you know, it's not a brick masonry classroom with nothing else in it. We have clothing, and we have books, and we have shelves, and we have chairs and stuff on the walls everywhere, curtains in many cases. So all that heat that went up in the ceiling is spreading out, and it took a minute for that to go up. So think about how long it would take you guys to get out of that room. And also, it's important to think about where that was in the room. It was right by the door. There's literally no way that anybody could get through that door if that was sitting, you know, on fire by the door. Does anybody recognize that? Has anyone ever been out to that school? Some of you might. I don't want to dime them out. I mean, you're going to know who it is, but that's a school that built a tree and put it on the wall, and it's almost identical to the one. It's just not freestanding, but that's right by the front entryway of that school, you know, in between the bathroom and the school. And there's also a doorway. You can get to a closet in there, put flammables in it. So I said, hey, you guys got to take that down. And that was August of 2017. And they're like, okay. Well, lo and behold, May of 2018, I went back. We have a whole different issue, right? It's not as bad, but it's still flammable stuff near the door, okay? It's something you guys have to be aware of. It's something you have to think about, and I know it's super important to keep the classrooms decorated and happy and fun and welcoming for the students, but we also don't want to put them at risk. We don't want to put them at risk unnecessarily, okay? Here's the law. Employers, so school district, you know, school districts have to familiarize employees with general principles of fire extinguisher use. Like, how do you use, where's it at? You know, what are the general uses of the different types of extinguishers? And then the hazards of fighting fires. So you guys, you know, it could be a pamphlet, it could be a discussion, it could be a class like this, but every year and before, you know, within the first couple of weeks that someone comes to work for a school district, you're supposed to talk about fire safety. Training's got to be completed upon initial employment, and then every single year after that. Employees that are designated, so if it's your job, or if they say, hey, during a fire, you have responsibility for this fire extinguisher, then you're actually required to be taught how to use it, which means you actually get to take a fire extinguisher outside, pull the pin, and squirt a fire, or a fake fire, but you're supposed to learn how to use it. Now, this year I wanted to do that training with you guys. I have a fire pan and fire extinguishers, and I come out and do that. But we can't do it right now. So hopefully this fall, when it gets a little bit, you know, wetter and cooler, and we don't have the virus running rampant, I'll bring that stuff out, and we can even do it with the kids there. It'll be a lot of fun, and you guys can put out a real fire. As long as we don't start the forest on fire, we'll be fine, okay? But that's the plan. There's this thing called the National Fire Incident Reporting System. And what they do is they collect all the data from all the fires across the country, and they try and figure out if there's any trends, and then how to stop those trends from, you know, getting worse. They've found that fatalities in school fires are extremely rare. In fact, the last time there was a fatality in a school fire was 1958, which is pretty amazing. But it's because we do drills. It's because we have fire extinguishers, because we have trained people. There's 3 leading causes of school structure fires. Incendiary suspicious, obviously, that, you know, that's the kid smoking in the boys' room. You know, there's a fire, we're not really sure why it started or what's going on, but, you know, the trash can in the bathroom caught fire, 32%. Cooking, 29%. And it's not necessarily the food service folks starting fires. Usually what it is it's the home ec classes, or what we call culinary arts now. It's not home ec anymore. Culinary arts, kids are doing stupid stuff like putting a stack of Starburst in the microwave to see what happens, okay, well, it catches on fire. And then heating. Heating cause about 29 or 9% of the fires. And it's not the big HVAC systems, you know, your furnace is not causing the problem. What it is those little red hot heaters that you have under your desk on a cold day right next to the trash can that's full of paper. I've had many custodians tell me during this class that they routinely find classrooms on a Friday evening when they go in to clean up after the week is over with a hot running heater right next to a trash can underneath the teacher's desk. So be really, really careful, okay? You gotta, if you're gonna use one of those, make sure it's UL certified and you're allowed to have it and it's not near any combustibles and flammables. It has a timer on it so it'll shut off automatically if you don't keep resetting it, you know, or just don't use it. Most of the fires start in the bathroom, and then through K through 12 schools, most of them start at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. And my theory on this, I think, is that kids come back to school after the summer and they want to show off for their friends. And so they're pulling out the lighter that they stole from their big brother. It's like, ooh, look what I got. And I know how to light a lighter. And then, you know, something gets caught on fire. At the end of the year, the kids just don't care. They're just, it's party time. They're leaving scorched earth policy behind them. So just keep an eye out, especially at those times of years. The average cost of damage for a school fire is between $17,000 and $34,000. And it's like, ooh, for a school fire, that doesn't sound bad. But that includes all the trash cans. So, you know, most of the fires are a little trash can fire. It's no big deal. You know, if it's metal, just clean it out. If it's plastic, it melts, you throw it away. But when you add in, you know, all those fires to the several big fires where you have a whole wing burn down, or somebody builds a fire underneath a you know, a covered walkway and that burns down, you start seeing you're going to have problems with recouping that cost. The you know, the real problems though aren't necessarily the repurchase and building of that structure. The problem is, what are you going to do with all the kids and the teachers who've lost use of that facility? Are you going to have to rent, you know, some mobiles, or are you going to have to move them, jam them into another classroom, or put them in your gymnasium and lose the use of that facility? So, you know, keep your eye out for potential fire issues. Here's more of the law. When we're talking about decorations, less is more. You guys got to make sure you're not concealing or blocking any exit doors, the exit lights, any electrical outlets. So you can't cover over electrical outlets or put stuff in front of electrical outlets. You're not supposed to cover fire alarms, and you certainly can't cover or hide fire extinguishers behind something else. They have to be visible and they have to be able to be accessed in an emergency. The stuff on your walls should be fire resistant, and it's not all going to be fire resistant, but you can spray it with fire resistant spray. There's a couple of different products, and they're pretty good. But decorations in your classroom, like Christmas trees or wreaths or dioramas and things like that, they should be fire resistant. Here's the point of contention with a lot of folks: is you're only supposed to have 25% of your walls covered with non-fire resistant decorations, and that includes all the little cutouts and all the you know, the papers and the pictures that the kids draw. Unless it's fire resistant, you know, you can't cover more than one of your 4 walls with that. So if you average it out, think about how much space you're using right now. Also, you can't have any decorations within 4 feet from the exits in the corners. And the reason is, you know, you guys just saw the reason. It's because of the fire that prevents people from getting out of the room, like that tree that was on fire. And you can't have anything overhead. That's another point of contention with a lot of folks. They want to hang stuff from the ceiling. I'm a big fan of stuff, you know, hanging from the ceiling. When I was a kid, I had a teacher that I loved. She was awesome. And every week throughout the school year, she would hang another planet. We would make a planet and she would hang it. We started out with the sun, and then all the way across the whole ceiling of the classroom, we got to hang another planet every week. And then we studied that planet. It was the neatest thing, paper mache, you know, but you can't do that, because if you think about the heat that came off of that burning tree, it all went up. And the heat rises, all that stuff will spontaneously combust. It'll fall down on the kids and on the other stuff in the room and create a fire. So nothing overhead, nothing hanging. Also, you cannot have any open flames. No candles, no potpourri, you know, incense burners, none of that stuff. The only The only thing you can have, the only exception is if you have like a little potpourri pot or something, an incense, something that smells good, and it's run by a light bulb. The heating element is a light bulb, or it plugs into the wall, and it has a UL, or Underwriter's Laboratory, sticker on it that says it's okay to be used indoors. Okay, but no open flames. If you have an approved place with a Bunsen burner for scientific reasons and it's under controlled circumstances, then that's an exception too. But that's most of our schools don't have those. If you take a look at this picture, a lot of you have seen this before. This is an accident waiting to happen. They've literally violated every single rule, including in the back part of the room. If you look at those windows, that could be considered an alternate egress, so a way you could get out of that room. They've even covered over the windows with paper and cut out hands, and there's stuff hanging from the ceilings, and everything in that classroom is flammable. So make sure you don't get into that situation. The fire marshal will make you take it down. They'll come out and they'll have words with you. When we're talking about cords and outlets, you guys all use power strips for the same reason we were talking about before with the cords. There's just simply not enough outlets in the room for everything that we need. So when you're using power strips, they should have overcurrent protection, which means they have a little fuse that'll pop out if you overload it. Now, I've gone to schools and I've found those fuses taped down. Don't tape those fuses down. They're supposed to pop to reduce the amount of heat in there so you don't start a fire. You should only have one power strip per outlet, which means you can't plug 2 power strips into one outlet. A lot of the power strips have 6 outlets in it themselves. So if you're turning an outlet with 2 outlets, 2 plugins to one with 6, well, that's going to draw a lot of current and heat up. Okay, if you plug another one in, now you've turned that one outlet that has 2 plugins into potentially 12. That's way too much, and you're going to hopefully blow the fuse in the wall. Okay. Everything you plug in, including these power strips, should have a UL sticker stamped or attached to it in some way. That just means that somebody smart looked at it and determined that it's going to be okay. It's not going to heat up too much and cause a fire. And then watch your amperages. The reason things catch on fire is because there's too much current, which means there's too much heat running through too small of a wire. The way you can determine whether or not you're going to overload that power strip is by looking on the back and look at what its amperage or current rating is. If you look at the current rating, it'll tell you in watts or amps, and then you look at each one of the devices you have plugged into it and add the same watts or amps up on those, and then compare the two. The ones that are going to be drawing too much current are the things that are going to be heating up. So hot plates, coffee pots, heaters, those are going to draw way too much current to be running through a power strip. So plug those things, the things that heat up, and then the refrigerators and microwaves, make sure you plug those directly into a wall socket. Do not run them through a power strip. Something else you can do to keep yourself safe from fires is reduce combustibles in your classroom. I know teachers love to keep that stuff that they made, back when they're a kindergarten teacher, and now they're teaching a 6-7 combo, but they still have all their kindergarten stuff because maybe someday they might need it. You guys got to cut sling load on that stuff and get rid of it. Give it to somebody else, take it home, but get it out of the classroom. Get it out of the way. It's going to be a fire hazard, and it's also a tripping hazard. It also can, it distract people once you get a bunch of clutter built up like that. If you see the picture here, you'll see that there's a minimum of 24 inches allowed between stuff on top of the storage container or shelf and the ceiling. It's because of that heat that rises if there's a fire. So think about where you're storing your stuff in your classroom. If you have cabinets or wall lockers and then you have a bunch of stuff stored on top of that within 24 inches of the ceiling, then the fire marshal is going to make you take it down. Now, if you have sprinkler system, which most of our schools do not have sprinkler systems. If you have a sprinkler system, you can go at 18 inches, but it only buys you 6 inches. So it's kind of a moot point, especially since we don't have sprinkler systems. For fire extinguishers, the easy way to remember how to use a fire extinguisher, and we'll go over this again this fall if we get to use the fire extinguishers for real, is the PASS acronym. Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. I'm going to show you guys on a fire extinguisher here in a minute how to do the inspection, but the bottom line is you pull the pin, you're going to aim the nozzle of the fire extinguisher at the base of the fire closest to you. Think about squirting your driveway off with a hose. It's the same principle. You want to squirt that fire and sweep it off of the burning material, okay? So as you squeeze the handle and the fire extinguisher starts squirting, and you're just going to sweep back and forth and sweep that fire off the top. If you have a trash can, you're going to do the same thing. You're not going to go ahead and squirt that down into the trash can because there's enough pressure, in these fire extinguishers to kind of blow the burning paper out of the trash can. So you kind of you'll lob it into the top of the trash can. When you start talking about a fire extinguisher, a dry chemical fire extinguisher, which is the kind you have ABC fire extinguishers, which means they're good for things that like wood and paper and fuel, electrical fires. If you have an ABC fire extinguisher and you're squirting that dry chemical on that fire, the only thing you're doing is you're taking oxygen away. You're not taking the heat away, and you're not taking the fuel away. So you have to make sure that you take that into account. If you get that fire out, it may reignite. So you're still going to have to get the kids out of there, especially if there's smoke, and then you're going to have to go ahead and be prepared for it to reignite, and call the fire department if you have to. Fire extinguishers have to be accessible. They have to be mounted 3.5 to 5 feet above the floor, and they got to be within 3 feet of the door. So that's pretty restrictive. If you think about your classrooms, where are your fire extinguishers? Are they close to the door, and are they 3.5 to 5 feet above the floor? If they're sitting on the floor, that's a problem. They get kicked over, knocked over, something get placed in front of them. One of the things that makes fire inspectors really angry is when they see a door propped open with a fire extinguisher. Just make sure that there's nothing jammed up in front of that fire extinguisher so you can actually see it. Also, you need to have signage and inspection tags. Frequently, there's things in the classroom that'll prevent you from seeing the fire extinguisher from other parts of the classroom, even if it's out in the open and you can see it from when you're standing in front of it. So a sticker above it that's high so you can see it from other parts of the classroom is really helpful. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the fire extinguisher for a minute. Okay, so this is an ABC fire extinguisher. It's good for all kinds of different fires. It's got an inspection tag on it. It's got the nozzle right here. Some of them have a hose, some of them have a nozzle. It's got a little safety pin retaining clip right here, this little plastic thing. And the kids love to play with these and they'll break them off. So when you look at your fire extinguisher, you start at the top. Make sure it's got that the safety pin retaining clip on it, right? It's got the pull ring right here. And then it's got a inspection tag. Every single month throughout the year, someone should be going through your classroom and looking at this inspection tag. Okay, you're looking at this, make sure it's got the clip, make sure it's got the pin in place, make sure there's nothing leaking out of the nozzle, make sure there's no dust or debris around the neck. And then, of course, you're going to look at the dial to make sure it's still in the green, which means it's still pressurized. Okay, then you just put your initials on here and the date, and you're good to go. So that should be done every single month, right? Again, when you're using this fire extinguisher, you don't have to worry about this retaining clip. All you got to do is pull the pin, pull it out. If it breaks off completely, fine, throw it away. You don't need it. You pull that pin, you're going to squeeze the two handles together. You're going to aim at the base of the fire, and you're going to press both handles. When you're squeezing the handles, you'll hold them down until the fire is out or until the fire extinguisher is empty. Don't squirt, squirt, squirt. It doesn't work that way. So hold it down and then use it up. If you have to use another fire extinguisher to get that fire out, go ahead and do so. But if that's the case, it might be time to go ahead and evacuate the area and call the fire department. All right, let's talk about laws and requirements for pest management. Now, I'm not giving you guys your pesticide Healthy Schools Act training. All I'm doing is giving you a quick reminder of what needs to happen. The Healthy Schools Act is a law that went into place way back in 2001 through AB 2260, and it just talks about what you should be told as an employee at a school district or anyone who comes on a school district in relation to pesticides. So if you're being exposed to any, what it is, what's wrong with them, how can you protect yourself? In 2006, AB 405 came out and they prohibited certain pesticides. So when I do my pesticide training, I give a list of pesticides that are prohibited. And it's actually there's a giant list, but every year they come up with a new little list of chemicals and pesticides that they're not quite sure of, that they're still in development with, and they shouldn't have on school campuses. In 2007, AB 2865 came out. They added private child care centers. So literally everywhere a student goes, except for if you watch somebody's, some neighbor's kid after school at your house, all these rules apply wherever the students go. For school or childcare, after school programs, things of that nature. And then new in 2015, SB 4205 came out. That's what required you guys to do that online training, the Healthy Schools Act training. You also have to have an integrated pest management plan, have a report sent to the DPR every year, but that's your maintenance guy. You don't have to worry about that. So Healthy Schools Act requirements for schools, you gotta have a school designee. Somebody at your school is your IPM coordinator. You got to provide annual written notification of all the pesticides that are expected to be used to all the students. And then you also need to have an individual registration notification sent out to all the parents and ask them if they want to be notified before pesticides are used. Okay. You got to post warning signs. So if you ever come to school and you see warning signs posted that say this is a pesticide treated area, they're just following the law. It might have been a benign chemical or something, but they still have to post that before and then leave it up after the spraying is done. 24 hours before, and then they got to leave it for 72 hours up afterwards. And you got to keep records. So all those records are kept for 4 years. Okay. On top of that, and this is added, you got to complete this IPM training. The IPM training you can do online. You can do it with me once we get back in the swing of things. You can develop your own program. There's a lot of different ways to do the IPM training. Fortunately, over the last year or two, they've realized that the original training that the DPR put together on the internet was terrible. It was horrible. We all complained. It was like a computerized voice that was reading stuff off a slide, and so we all complained. So it was also an hour long, and they've fixed it. They made it much better. They've got to the point now where it's like 40 minutes. There's 3 different classes depending on who you are. So you guys as teachers don't have to sit through something that the maintenance folks or someone who's a commercial applicator would be sitting through, which is what they did the first time. It was kind of silly. So the IPM training is going to be extremely important because you guys all are going to probably want to be able to use antibacterial sprays or wipes at school when the kids come back because of COVID-19. And you're required by law to go through that training before you use those in the classroom or on campus anywhere, actually. When you're talking about integrated pest management, we're really talking about a combination of things. So instead of just spraying a bug or spraying weeds or using bleach on a surface because kids touched it, we're looking at long-term prevention. How do we keep things clean without resorting to chemicals? You do that through a combination of techniques. Just teaching kids how to wash their hands. Teaching them not to sneeze on hard surfaces. Taking care of weeds before they become a problem. Not leaving sweet, sticky stuff out in the classrooms for ants and other bugs to get into. And really, it's important if we attack it from all those different directions, then we're not going to have to use pesticides and chemicals, which is the whole idea behind the Healthy Schools Act. Is we want to limit the amount of pesticides in the school areas. We just want to keep it safe for the kids. So we use the least hazardous pesticide in the smallest amount possible to take care of the issue, and that frequently means soap and water. You can clean stuff with soap and water. You can even clean up after a student who has COVID-19 with soap and water, and be fine. It's probably good to go ahead and sanitize after that using a chemical, but most all that stuff can just be cleaned up using soap and water. And then we always remember that we're using these things, looking at it from a health and environment approach. We live in a beautiful place. We got rivers and streams and beneficial insects like bees, but we don't want to kill that stuff, so using the least hazardous pesticide when it's only absolutely necessary is the best course of action. This used to be an important slide because I had a lot of people who just say, well, I'm not going to use pesticide. I'm not going to use antibacterial sprays and wipes around kids. Kids will just have to get sick, or I'm just not going to do it because I don't believe in it. With the virus, you know, there's a responsibility to care for those students. And in the way that the law states is you guys are acting in loco parentis, and you have to provide for the safety and health of the students as determined by the courts. That means you instruct and supervise, but you also have to make sure they're not getting sick, okay, or hurting each other. And so really the only way to prevent them from getting sick in this case with this pandemic, since it pretty much looks like we're going back to school in the fall, is by using antibacterial sprays and wipes. So use the fewest, least toxic ones you can, and you know, keep an eye on those kids, because we don't want them getting sick, and we can't afford to get sick either, or we're not going to be able to teach the students. Another thing I like to show people is the potential for disaster that exists underneath our sinks. This looks like a normal everyday sink underneath a school classroom sink, and it is. But the problem is what's stored there. If you see here, we have distilled water, right? Just a jug of distilled water, and it's got a piece of tape on it. So we're not really sure. Wait a minute, what is in this? Somebody might have reused this jug. It could be anything in there. And then you have bleach. Sodium hypochlorite is an excellent antiviral, antibacterial cleaner. There's nothing wrong with bleach as long as it's handled safely and it's diluted appropriately, okay? But the problem here is with this bleach, now you have acid, which is Drano, all right, or extra drain in this case, and then you have ammonia. So when you start mixing things like bleach and ammonia, you get chloramines. It's deadly gas. And then if you mix bleach and acids, you get chlorine gas, which is used in combat to kill human beings, okay? So, and it's all conveniently located in one spot in the classroom underneath the sink. You have to be very careful with this stuff. So do an inventory every year. Usually at the end of the year is the best time to do it. Go through all your nooks and crannies, go through your closets, and make sure you don't have any potential nightmares or time bombs like this sitting there. Get rid of the stuff you don't need. Make a list of the things that you want to keep, and then make sure that the coordinator, the IPM coordinator, has a list of all those, because you have to have a safety data sheet for each one of them too, which is easy to get. You just print it off the internet. For the pesticide use training requirements, there's 2 different certifications. For the normal person at the school district who's just using antibacterial sprays and wipes and cleaning stuff up, all you need to do is do the Healthy Schools Act training. But if you are outside and you're spraying a reportable pesticide like Roundup or Bandini, Weed and Feed, or anything else that's reportable to the state, then I need to do a certification training for that person. There's some extra resources there for you. I would highly encourage you guys to go to our website. We have a ton of stuff on COVID-19. We have a bunch of information on workers' compensation and even prestige. Anything you guys want to know about safety and your insurance.